John. Well, you know, as the Reverend Jesse Jackson arrived among a crowd of conservative protesters, he created quite a stir out here in front of the hospice. In fact, while he was holding a news conference, a guy was being subdued by a taser gun by police. Apparently, this guy tried to manage to get past police lines. This guy from Pennsylvania is the first protester to have gotten this close to the hospice. The officers had to use a taser gun to subdue him and take him into custody. That brings the total number arrested now to 47. Protesters growing more and more frustrated and angry over Terry's 12-day starvation and dehydration here in Pinellas Park. Jesse Jackson joined the group of protesters early this morning and spent the day praying with the Schindler family and appealing to state senators here in Florida to step up and have Terry Schiavo's feeding tube reinserted.
I'm on the phone today talking with members of the Senate, asking them to be creative enough to try to fashion some emergency legislation to stop the starving, to stop the dehydration.
I wanted to thank the Reverend Jesse Jackson for coming, giving us his support and supporting our family and praying with us. It was wonderful.
Now, the Schindlers see the Reverend's visit as renewed hope for them, but the realistic odds are stacked against them. Despite Jackson's promises, it's unlikely he'll have any legal influence unless he gets a whole new bill drafted. As of now, Governor Jeb Bush is powerless. So far, all of his appeals to have Terry's feeding tube reinserted have been rejected by the courts. And the governor himself has said that though it breaks his heart, he will abide by the court's decision not to intervene. So now, the only hope for the Schindlers is a dim one. The Department of Children and Families has 3 outstanding appeals in the 2nd District Court of Appeal. However, that judge panel giving no indication when or if they will rule. Meantime, Michael Schiavo, Terry's husband and legal guardian, calling those latest appeals blatantly unconstitutional. John?
Julie Banderas in Pinellas Park. Julie, thanks very much. Terry Schiavo's parents gave her life, but they seem to have no legal rights when it comes to her impending death or, adding insult to injury, not even over where she is buried. The courts have said over and over again that decision, those decisions, rest with her husband, Michael, a man who was married to Terry for less than 6 years before she suffered severe brain damage, a man who's been living with another woman the last 10 years. But Michael Schiavo is still considered Terry's legal guardian. Joining me now from Atlanta is family law attorney John Mayo. John, a big question today. So what rights do parents have in these cases?
Well, let me say this to you first. I have tremendous empathy for the Schindlers and the Schiavos. I've handled 2 of these cases, one personally, one professionally. It's the most gut-wrenching, heartbreaking thing a family will ever go through.
You know, when you give me a warm-up like that, John, you're about to deliver bad news. What is it?
Well, the bad news, I guess, to me, is good news. We need to protect the sanctity of traditional marriage in this country. And believe it or not, the Florida legislature has already done so by having a statute that says the surviving spouse is the decision maker regarding cremation. And that's what's going to happen here.
Wait a minute, John. This is a guy who has set up another family. He's claiming marital rights, even though if the woman was conscious, she may very well say, he's got another wife and kids, I want a divorce. I mean, how can you talk about the sanctity of marriage in this situation?
Well, the better view may have been, perhaps back in 1993 or 1994, perhaps someone on behalf of Terry should have instituted an action for divorce. You realize incompetence can do that. It's very controversial, but they can do that. But that wasn't done. And so we're left in a situation where he is her spouse as of her death, and the Florida legislature has spoken.
Yeah,
they have said, John, excuse me, they have said...
we know what the legislature says because it's gone up and down the courts, and no judge has disagreed with it. But here you've got a situation where, A, she is being allowed to die in opposition to the parents' wishes, and then even after she's dead, he's going to have her cremated and put in a mausoleum somewhere in Pennsylvania when they would like her in Florida. It seems as though the parents have no claim on their daughter at all.
Well, that's the traditional view of marriage in this country and others, but there's 2 lessons to be learned here. Number 1, do a living will. Express your intent while you're living. And 2, do a will that says what you want to have happen to your body. The traditional view of marriage is parents don't get to make these decisions. That's something our legislature can change, but they haven't chosen to do so.
But wait a minute. Even in a situation where the person is incapacitated and you have a husband who has already set up another family, and this is a marriage in legal name only, not in practical name, the courts can't even recognize that he shouldn't make all of these decisions?
It's the same argument, John, we had about him being a guardian. You see, people said, look, he's got a conflict of interest here. He shouldn't be the guardian. That has gone through some 20-something judges over a period of 12 years.
Doesn't that suggest that judges are a little out of touch with what most people think?
I really think that we're out of touch because we're criticizing 20-something judges, many medical professionals that have looked at this for years and years and years. And they have decided the issue to be decided in this case, what were Terry's wishes. Now, John, let me tell you this. I don't disagree that this man may have some conflicts as we sit here today. Obviously, with the other person, with other children, that
Another
sort of
wife.
thing.
Call her what she is.
Now, well, she's not a wife, but she's another person. But what's happened here is the people representing Terry, and this is not a criticism of them, have never carried the burden of proof in the courts to show that he is so biased that, number one, he should be disqualified, and number two, the testimony that he gave and
All right,
others
then,
gave,
John,
that
would
these
you
were her
even,
wishes, were in fact her wishes.
Well, you know, John, come on. Everybody who testified to that is named Schiavo. Every single person. And now they're going to be taken off to a Schiavo family plot. She's going to be put in a mausoleum where he will join her later. And then what? His new wife is going to be beside? And then kids? I mean, at the very least, can't somebody on an official level, and I'll make it you, can't at the very least somebody say, look, this guy's being awfully selfish. Not only does he get his desire for her death, but he gets to say what happens to her afterwards in opposition to her parents.
That's what happens with surviving spouses in this country. If we want to change the scheme of marriage, we can do so. But we protect marriage from interference by the government, by our in-laws, by our stepsisters, by our brothers and sisters. It's something we've traditionally done. I can't tell you I don't have tremendous empathy for the Schindlers, but also Mr. Schiavo in this case. But we have a system in place, and we've had that system for hundreds of years.
Why is this system, John, blind to the reality? I mean, the reality is, as you said, the guy is conflicted. He's got another family. He started another family. Why have 20-some-odd judges over all these years you've talked with never recognized what everybody else can see clear as day, the reality of this marriage?
Well, of course, you and I weren't there, John, but I'll say this. They have not found that his conflicts were so great that he didn't realistically and honestly express her wishes. That's the question. What were her wishes? Did she want to remain in this condition or not? We don't know the answer to that other than through testimony of witnesses.
Then what about this business of he wants her cremated and taken to Pennsylvania? Her parents want her buried, which I think is their Catholic tradition, in Florida somewhere near them. Why does this extend to that degree?
Well, in this case, the Florida legislature has spoken. They've said specifically cremation is going to be decided by the surviving spouse. The way he's disqualified, believe it or not, is by them coming forth today and showing that he was somehow guilty of domestic violence during their marriage, which I would seriously doubt they could carry that burden. But more so, even if this statute didn't exist, this is the issue. If you don't come forward and say in a living will, go write one on a napkin, this is how I want to die or live, and this is what I want to have happen to my body in my will, then this kind of fight is what's going to ensue.
John, can you at least say that this is at least a transgression of what everybody would recognize as what ought to happen?
See, that's the problem. The way traditional marriage works, everybody doesn't get to say.
I think you're stretching things calling this a traditional marriage, but I'll let you get away with it now. John Mayo, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me, John.
Coming up on the big story, President Bush once again touting Iraq as a prime example of a new democracy. Can he turn